pugnacious, combative, unyielding, brash. Oh, and the Supreme Court. Those are the real reasons why Donald Trump is in the middle of an impeachment trial right now. I'm Randall Terry. This is Voice of Resistance. Welcome to the program, friend. In just a moment, I'm going to play for you a speech that was made on the Senate floor by Sekulow at the onset of these proceedings. Jay and I go back 30 years, more than 30 years. The first time that we met, he came to see me in a jail cell. 1988, I was in jail in Atlanta, and then we began a lifelong friendship. I'm so proud of him. He is doing such a great job defending the president. And the reason I'm going to play his opening remarks is because most of the secular media will not show it to you. So most Americans do not get their news here. They don't get it at Fox News. They don't even get it at Rush or Sean. Most Americans are still getting their news from the three major networks, the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, MSNBC. One of the ways that I feel that I can help you and serve the country is to show you things that other media outlets aren't showing. But before I go there, I want to speak freely with you about why this is happening. If you go all the way back to the elevator ride, the escalator ride, when President Trump, now President Trump, came down the escalator and announced his run for the presidency, he talked about building a wall on the southern border because a lot of rapists and criminals were coming over the border. That began a backlash against him from the media and from the political world because he spoke his mind in a way that conservatives and patriots would speak their mind around a water cooler at work, a lunchroom at work, a family gathering, after church in the church foyer or in the church parking lot. He said things that we were saying that the political establishment refused to say. They might have thought it. President Trump isn't the first Republican or the first conservative to think the things that he has said out loud. He's just the man, or the first man, to say them out loud. And so he began a relationship with the other Republican contenders and with the media, and then ultimately with the Democrat Party in the election and with the media. He began this relationship throwing punches, being combative, being brash, being articulate sometimes talking in fifth grade sentences is what they were constantly saying. But it was his tone, and it was his message, and it was the fact that he refused to back down. Jeb Bush said, "You can't insult your way to the White House." Evidently, Jeb was wrong, because so many millions of people had it with the status quo in the Republican Party and in the Democrat Party. All right, President Trump wins the election. Before he's sworn in, the first Democrats are talking about impeaching him. Before he is sworn in, President Obama and then Clapper, Brennan, and Comey, this trio of people involved in the intelligence and law enforcement community, they produce a plan to take President Trump out, and it's called the Steele dossier. They are going to use a false dossier to create a hoax of Trump-Russia collusion to win the election. Almost 2 years, $45 million. The Mueller investigation tasked with investigating President Trump showed that there was no collusion. It was a farce from the very, very beginning. But why were the top dogs of the intelligence and law enforcement community, probably in cahoots with President Obama himself, why were they so hell-bent on destroying this presidency? Well, as I mentioned in my opening, it's got to do with his personality, but it has to do with policy, starting with the Supreme Court. That is what this has always been about. Keeping Roe versus Wade intact. Keeping Obergefell, the so-called homosexual marriage decision. That's what this is all about, people. It's about national sins that we are committing, evils in our midst that will in fact bring the judgment of God upon us, that President Trump has vowed to stand against explicitly with Roe, not explicitly with Obergefell, but by virtue of the fact that he released the names of those 20 candidates for the Supreme Court, those 20 potential judicial picks for the Supreme Court. The who's who in the media, the who's who in the Democrat Party understood that if President Trump was successful in appointing 3, 4 justices, what would make up a Trump court, that the stranglehold of iniquity and immorality and lawlessness that is on our country that has originated from the Supreme Court, that stranglehold would be broken, that it would be over. That is what this is all about. That is what it has always been about. So I hope, I pray that these proceedings are over quickly. Hopefully next week. You're watching the news like I am, seeing all the stuff that's going on. Hopefully Mitch McConnell will hold the line. Even if he doesn't, I just don't see there being 2/3 of the Senate willing to remove this president from office on something that is not an impeachable offense. They've wanted him out of office since before he was sworn into office. And this is their last gasp before the election. I've got to take a break. When we come back, we're going to hear from Jay Sekulow on the Senate floor. Without doubt, in my opinion, the high point of his legal career. Don't go away. Introducing Roxy Guitar. If you're a guitar or bass player, whether you play acoustic or electric, check out Roxy Guitar. I've been playing for over 40 years and seen guitar stores all over America. I've never seen a store like Roxy Guitar. Roxy Guitar has over 700 guitars in stock, over 1,500 pedals, over 200 amps. For the beginner or price-conscious buyer, there's Michael Kelly guitars. For the serious player or professional, Roxy Guitar has the finest selection of guitar lines I've ever seen. You know I love Warrior guitars. Roxy Guitar has over 100 Warriors in stock. They have Heritage, G&L, Gretsch, John Sears, BC Rich, Duesenberg, Dean, legendary guitars at great prices, including pre-owned Gibsons, Fenders, and more. Let them know you heard about Roxy Guitar from Randall Terry and receive 10% or more off your purchase on select items. Go to roxyguitar.com. President Trump is a New Yorker, and he has hired an attorney with a New York background, Jay Sekulow, pugnacious, bold. He actually toned it back on this presentation in front of the U.S. Senate. I give you my friend and a great attorney and an attorney for the President of the United States, Jay Sekulow.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Justice, members of the Senate, Leader McConnell, Democratic Leader Schumer. It's also my privilege to represent the President of the United States before this chamber. Senator Schumer said earlier today that the eyes of the founders are on these proceedings. Indeed, that's true. But it is the heart of the Constitution that governs these proceedings. And what we just heard from Manager Schiff, courts have no role, privileges don't apply. What happened in the past, we should just ignore. In fact, Manager Schiff just said, try to summarize my colleague's defense of the president. He said, not in those words, of course, which is not the first time Mr. Schiff has put words into transcripts that did not exist. Mr. Schiff also talked about a trifecta. I'll give you a trifecta. During the proceedings that took place before the Judiciary Committee, The president was denied the right to cross-examine witnesses. The president was denied the right to access evidence. And the president was denied the right to have counsel present at hearings. That's a trifecta that violates the Constitution of the United States. Mr. Schiff did say the courts really don't have a role in this. Executive privilege, why would that matter? It matters because it's based on the Constitution of the United States. One manager said that it is you that are on trial, the Senate. He also said that, and others did, that you're not capable of abiding by your oath. And then we had the invocation of the ghost of the Mueller report. I know something about that report. It came up empty on the issue of collusion with Russia. There was no obstruction. In fact, the Mueller report, to the contrary of what these managers say today, came to the exact opposite conclusions of what they say. Let me quote from the House impeachment report at page 16. Although President Trump has in times invoked the notion of due process, an impeachment trial, an impeachment inquiry is not a criminal trial and should not be confused with it. Believe me, what has taken place in these proceedings is not to be confused with due process. Because due process demands, and the Constitution requires, that fundamental fairness and due process, we're hearing a lot about due process is designed to protect the person accused. When the Russia investigation failed, it devolved into the Ukraine. A quid pro quo. When that didn't prove out, it was then bribery or maybe extortion, or somebody said, one of the members or the members of the House said treason. But instead we get two articles of impeachment. Two articles of impeachment that have a vague allegation about a non-crime allegation of abuse of power and obstruction of Congress. Managers, right here, before you today, who have said that executive privilege and constitutional privileges have no place in these proceedings. On June 28, 2012, Attorney General Eric Holder became the first United States Attorney General to be held in both civil and criminal contempt. Why? Because President Obama asserted executive privilege. With respect to the Holder contempt proceedings, Mr. Manager Schiff wrote, the White House assertion of privilege is backed by decades of precedent that has recognized the need for the President and his senior advisors to receive candid advice and information from their top aides. Indeed, that's correct. Not because Manager Schiff said it, but because the Constitution requires it. Mr. Manager Nadler said that the effort to hold Eric Holder, Attorney General Holder, in contempt for refusing to comply with various subpoenas was, quote, politically motivated, and Speaker Pelosi called the Holder matter, and I quote, a little more than a witch hunt. What are we dealing with here? Why are we here? Are we here because of a phone call? Or are we here before this great body because since the president was sworn into office, there was a desire to see him removed?
Notice how he went right after Adam Schiff's lies and the trifecta of evil, where he didn't allow the president counsel. That's your trifecta. All right, I've got to take a quick break. I'll be right back, and we'll finish up with more of Jay Sekulow.
I also want to speak tonight directly to Muslims throughout the world. We respect your faith. Its teachings are good and peaceful. And those who commit evil in the name of Allah blaspheme the name of Allah.
We have reaffirmed again and again that the United States is not and never will be at war with Islam. Islam teaches peace.
Islam is a religion of peace. They are not Muslims, they are monsters.
We've been told that Muslim terrorists have hijacked the peaceful religion of Islam. But Islamic art and literature tell a very different story. To know the truth, we only have to study the narrative of the founder of Islam, Muhammad, in his own words. Senator Lindsey Graham said that if the Democrats are successful, that the presidency as we understand it is over. And this has to do with executive privilege, the separation of powers. It might seem like an ethereal, I don't really care about that thing for some of us. No, it's important, people. It's really important because it has to do with the powers of the presidency. All right, here's Jay Sekulow talking about that.
I remember in the Mueller report, there were discussions about, remember, insurance policies. The insurance policy didn't work out so well. So then we moved to other investigations. I guess you would call it reinsurance or an umbrella policy. And that didn't work out so well. And here we are today. Manager Schiff quoted the Supreme Court, and I'd like to make reference to the Supreme Court as well. It was then Justice Rehnquist, later to be Chief Justice Rehnquist, who wrote for the majority in United States versus Russell in 1973. These are the words. We may someday be presented with a situation in which the conduct of law enforcement agents is so outrageous that due process principles would absolutely bar the government from invoking judicial process to obtain a conviction. That day is today. That day was a year ago. That day was in July when Special Counsel Mueller testified. I am not today going to take the time to review, and I will do it later, the pattern and practices of irregularities that have gone on in these investigations from the outset. But to say that the courts have no role, the rush to impeachment, to not wait for a decision from a court on an issue as important as executive privilege, as if executive privilege hasn't been utilized by presidents since our founding. This is not some new concept. We don't waive executive privilege, and there's a reason we keep executive privilege, and we assert it when necessary. And that is to protect the Constitution and the separation of powers. The president's opponents, in their rush to impeach, have refused to wait for complete judicial review. That was their choice. Speaker Pelosi clearly expressed her impatience and contempt for judicial proceedings when she said, "We cannot be at the mercy of the courts." Think about that for a moment. We cannot be at the mercy of the courts. So take Article 3 of the United States Constitution, remove it. We're acting as if the courts are an improper venue to determine constitutional issues of this magnitude. That is why we have courts. That is why we have a federal judiciary. It was interesting when Professor Turley testified before the House Judiciary Committee in front of Mr. Nadler's committee. He said, we have 3 branches of government, not 2. If you impeach a president, if you make a high crime and misdemeanor out of going to courts and abuse of power, it's your abuse of power. You know, it's more than that. A lot more than that. There's a lot more than an abuse of power if you say the courts don't apply. Constitutional principles don't apply. Let's start with a clean slate as if nothing happened. A lot has happened. As we proceed in the days ahead, we will lay out our case. We're going to put forward to the American people, but more important, for the Constitution's sake, what's taken place here. But this idea that we should ignore what has taken place over the last 3 years is outrageous. We believe that what Senator McConnell has put forward provides due process, allows the proceedings to move forward in an orderly fashion. 33 days. 33 days they held on to those impeachment articles. 33 days. It was such a rush of national security to impeach this president before Christmas that they then held him for 33 days. To do what? To act as if they negotiate, the House of Representatives should negotiate the rules of the United States Senate. They didn't hide this. This was the express purpose. This was the reason they did it. We're prepared to proceed. Majority Leader, Democratic Majority Leader, we're prepared to proceed. In our view, these proceedings should begin.
Great job, Jay. I'm praying for you, sir, and I'm praying that we win this quickly and that President Trump goes on being a great president. I'll be right back. Please don't go away. What Would Mohammed Do? Islamic Terrorism Explained is the best movie series documentary ever produced on the life of Muhammad and Islam. How do I know? Because it's what critics are saying. John Moore, radio host and author, said, "I learned more from What Would Mohammed Do about Islam and Islamic terrorism than I've learned from everything I ever read and watched in my entire life." Best-selling author Dr. Bill Warner said, "What Would Mohammed Do is the best movie series, TV production on the life of Muhammad and Islamic terrorism that has ever been produced." Friends, this is what the experts are saying. No one has ever done what we've done. I encourage you to get 1, 2, 4 copies. Call 304-289-3700. That's 304-289-3700, or order it at the address or the website that you see on the screen. Introducing Roxy Guitar. If you're a guitar or bass player, whether you play acoustic or electric, check out Roxy Guitar. I've been playing for over 40 years and seen guitar stores all over America. I've never seen a store like Roxy Guitar. Roxy Guitar has over 700 guitars in stock, over 1,500 pedals, over 200 amps. For the beginner or price-conscious buyer, there's Michael Kelly guitars. For the serious player or professional, Roxy Guitar has the finest selection of guitar lines I've ever seen. You know I love Warrior guitars. Roxy Guitar has over 100 Warriors in stock. They have Heritage, G&L, Gretsch, John Sears, BC Rich, Duesenberg, Dean, legendary guitars at great prices, including pre-owned Gibsons, Fenders, and more. Let them know you heard about Roxy Guitar from Randall Terry and receive 10% or more off your purchase on select items. Go to roxyguitar.com. Welcome back, friend. As if to punctuate the point that I made earlier in the program. Earlier today, President Trump became the first president of the United States to address the March for Life in person. I will play for you that speech next week, but it's a big deal. Make no bones about it. It is a big deal. And as I said at the beginning of this program, it goes to the heart and soul of why the left wing, the Democrat Party, the baby killers, those who reject and spurn the law of God, it goes to the heart of why they hate him and why they want him out of office. Now, please understand this. There's no way that there's going to be 2/3 of the Senate that vote to remove President Trump from office. The Democrats knew that at the onset of this whole debacle. Their hope was that the ability of these proceedings to mar President Trump, to wound him, to scar him, would be enough to give whatever Democrat wins the nomination the leg up in the swing states of the United States in the election of 2020. That's all that this has been about, the impeachment proceeding. It's a gamble. They knew if they didn't take the gamble that President Trump was going to steamroll whoever was the nominee. But now they have a hope, a forlorn hope perhaps, but a hope that President Trump can be defeated because they have scarred and marred him with this impeachment proceeding. I pray that they fail and that he appoints the judges that overturn Roe versus Wade. Have a great weekend. God bless you.